warlord or literator, loyal minister or ruthless usurper, lonely idealist or cunning opportunist. Cao Cao, the protagonist, the superstar of the famous Three Kingdoms period, is also one of the most contradictory giants in Chinese history. I'm Zhuge, talking about history and China. Today, we are diving into the life of Cao Cao to explore 8 dimensions to uncover the real man behind the legend. The youth, Zhuo Disaster, rising Yanzhou, Battle of Guandu, Red Cliffs as you know, Chibi, his usurpation, his court and relationship with Xun Yu, and finally, the death. This video is part 1, covering the first 4 chapters all the way from his early days to his victory over Yuan Shao in Guandu, which unified northern China. In 155 AD, Cao Cao was born into an unusual family during the late Eastern Han Dynasty. His grandfather, Cao Teng, was a powerful eunuch with huge influence at court, while his father, Cao Song, Cao Teng's adopted son, later purchased a high-ranking official position with money. Among the noble clans of the time, the Cao family was regarded as the descendant of a eunuch. This made Cao Cao feel discriminated against from a young age. Yet, this extraordinary background also shaped Cao Cao's unique personality. He displayed remarkable wit and a rebellious spirit from childhood. Most people regarded him as a troublemaker youth, but a few insightful figures like Xu Shao recognized his potential. Xu Shao had a really famous evaluation of him, that Cao Cao will be a capable minister in peaceful era, while a ruthless hero in turbulent times. This character, Xiong, which means simply hero, while the term Xian, while quite complex, a uniquely Chinese label, can be described as ruthless, traitorous, cunning, or unscrupulous. In his youth, Cao Cao aspired to be nothing more than a capable minister. At the age of 20, he entered officialdom as a commandant of northern Luoyang, the capital of Han Dynasty. On his first day in office, he forged some wooden roads and decreed that anyone, even the powerful nobles who violated the law, would be punished without mercy. Before long, the uncle of Jian Shuo, the influential eunuch, broke the law. Cao Cao showed no leniency, directly beating him to death with the wooden rods. This bold act shocked the entire city of Luoyang and revealed the young man's unwavering integrity. In 189 AD, just after the Yellow Turban Rebellion was suppressed, the Eastern Han Dynasty faced an even greater crisis. He Jin, the brother of Emperor's dowager, as well as the Grand General, invited Dong Zhuo, a warlord from the Xiliang region, to march on the capital Luoyang in order to eliminate those powerful eunuchs. But what happened next? It was a classic case of inviting a wolf into the house. He Jin was assassinated by the eunuch first. Then, his soldiers rounded up and killed all the palace eunuchs, nearly 2,000 men in total, to avenge. After that, Dong Zhuo marched into Luoyang. He immediately saw the weakness of the central government and seized control of the imperial palace. Dong Zhuo installed Emperor Xian as his puppet and allowed his soldiers to loot, murder, and burn without restraint, leading Luoyang into utter chaos. More than 1,000 years later, the Byzantine Empire faced a similar dilemma. Crippled by civil wars and noble power grabs, Byzantine leaders repeatedly invited Ottoman Turkish forces to fight their internal enemies, and we all know what the story ended. These two facts shared a warning. When political elites lose control of force and open the gates to survive internal power struggles, they often invite something far worse. However, the difference was decisive. Dong Zhuo was a product of the Han sister, a homegrown strongman who spat out Cliffs, the Ottoman. By contrast, were an external civilization with a long-term strategy of conquest. Okay, let's back to our main character. At that time, Cao Cao was serving as a captain of the Imperial Guard in Luoyang. Faced with Dong Zhuo, most ministers chose to remain silent. Some even actively defected to Dong Zhuo's side. But Cao Cao chose to resist. He escaped Luoyang and exhausted his family fortune to recruit troops and raise the banner of campaigning against Dong Zhuo. In 190, Yuan Shao was elected as the leader of the coalition of warlords opposing Dong Zhuo, and the feudal lords including Cao Cao from all regions responded to the call. However, most of them had their own motives, only wanted to preserve their own military strength. Cao Cao was one of the few who actually led his army into battle against Dong Zhuo's forces. Ultimately, he failed. Cao Cao had always known he couldn't defeat Dong Zhuo only by himself, yet he couldn't stand by and watch the Han dynasty being trampled. He narrowly escaped death in the battle. Back at the Allied camp, he let loose on those two-faced, greedy warlords.
今诸侯迟疑不进，大失天下之所望，我深感耻辱。
This defeat made him fully realize that relying on these warlords would never bring peace to the land. He had to build his military force, his own strong military force. At that time, he was 35 years old. In 192 AD, Dong Zhuo was killed by his famous general Lü Bu, and Cao Cao also encountered a fateful turning point. He was appointed as the governor of Yanzhou. As Machiavelli once said, even if a man commands the most powerful army, he must always gain the support of local people to enter and hold the region. The nobles and common people of Yanzhou hoped that Cao Cao could suppress the remaining Yellow Turban rebels in the region. Then, Cao Cao made it happen, and took those elite fighters into his own army and formed the famous Qingzhou Corps. Just like that, he had a core military force, but there was one big problem. Back in those chaotic, war-torn days, Cao Cao didn't have enough grain to keep his army fed and fighting. In 193, his father Cao Sun was killed by soldiers of Xuzhou. Enraged, Cao Cao led a massive army to conquer Xuzhou, driven both by a desire to avenge and by his greed for Xuzhou's abundant grain reserves. As a result, Cao Cao ordered indiscriminate slaughter wherever his army marched. When his troops captured cities, he spared neither soldiers nor civilians, indulging in looting, arson, and murder. Several cities in Xuzhou was reduced to charred ruins. This vengeful massacre became the biggest stain on Cao Cao's legacy, profoundly shaping his political reputation in the turbulent times. This is also maybe one of the main reasons why, in later folk tales, traditional operas, and especially the famous novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Cao Cao has always been portrayed as a traitorous minister, contrasted sharply with his lifelong academy, the most benevolent man, Liu Bei. But regardless, during that period, he adhered firmly to the principle of value talent above all, breaking the rigid class prejudices of his time to recruit capable individuals. Advisors such as Xun Yu and Cheng Yu gathered around him, forming his early core brain trust. Based on Yanzhou, Cao Cao defeated the rival warlords such as Yuan Shao, Lu Bu, and Liu Bei. By that time, Cao Cao had firmly established himself as one of China's most powerful warlords. In 196, Cao Cao made a decision that would reshape the fate of China, welcoming Emperor Xian into his territory. At that time, Emperor Xian had fled Chang'an, which was in chaos. Upon learning of the emperor's predicament, Cao Cao overrode objections from his advisors, led his army to escort Emperor Xian to his own base camp, Xuchang, renamed his city the imperial capital. From that moment on, he held the emperors hostage to command the warlords, a masterstroke that gave him a huge political advantage, forcing rival warlords to recognize his legitimacy. As Cao Cao's power grew, tensions escalated between him and Yuan Shao, the most powerful warlord in China. Born into the prestigious Yuan clan, a family that had produced 4 generations of top ministers, Yuan Shao controlled 4 provinces and commanded a massive army. He regarded Cao Cao as a mere upstart, utterly underestimating his rival. In 200 AD, Yuan Shao marched south with 100,000 troops, determined to crush Cao Cao in one decisive battle, while Cao Cao's forces numbered a mere 20,000. The Battle of Guandu began. During the early stages of the war, Cao Cao got beaten over and over again and was driven to the point of despair. He even wrote to Xun Yu, his trusted advisor in Xuchang, expressing his desire to retreat, but Xun Yu replied with words of encouragement. Though Yuan Shao had superior numbers, his army was plagued by internal conflict. If you, my lord, can persist, he argued, a chance to turn the tide of the battle would surely come. Just as Cao Cao struggled to hold on, Xu Yu and the advisor of Yuan Shao defected to Cao Cao's side after his family was arrested by Yuan Shao. Xu Yu delivered an important information. Yuan Shao's grain and supplies were stored in Wuchao, however, guarded by a heavy garrison. Without hesitation, Cao Cao decided to launch a night raid on Wuchao. Someone warned it might be a trap, but Cao Cao had no other choice. Outnumbered and low on provisions, he was forced to gamble everything on a single bold strike. Leading 5,000 elite troops disguised as Yuan Shao soldiers, Cao Cao marched towards Wuchao. This battle would not be won by numbers, supplies, or reputation. It would be won by sheer ruthlessness. Upon learning of the raid on Wuchao, Yuan Shao hastily dispatched reinforcements, one under the command of another general instead of himself. Unlike Cao Cao, who led his troops from the front and gambled everything on this strike, Yuan Shao lacked the courage to take the field himself in critical moments, leaving his army adrift without decisive leadership. At Wuchao, Cao Cao fought at the forefront of his troops, ordering an all-out attack. While his subordinates reported that enemy reinforcements were approaching and begged to split their forces to defense, Cao Cao, knowing this was a fight to the death, replied coldly, "Inform me only when the enemy is at my back." He demanded his men focus all their strength on storming the Wuchao camp. Inspired by their commander's bravery, Cao Cao's soldiers fought with unparalleled ferocity. Eventually, they crashed the defenses, killed Yuan Shao's general Xun Yu, and burned up all of the enemy's grain supplies. With their food stores destroyed, Yuan Shao's army fell into complete disarray. Seizing that moment, Cao Cao launched a full-scale counterattack. Yuan Shao's 100,000 troops collapsed instantly, and he fled north in panic with only 800 cavalry. Then, Yuan Shao fell ill from anxiety and anger, eventually died of sickness in 202. In the 7 years following the Battle of Guandu, Cao Cao eliminated Yuan Shao's sons Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang one by one, finally unified all of northern China. During the Han Dynasty, or all time before Tang Dynasty in ancient China, northern China boasted a larger population and much more grain supplies than the south. Thus, Cao Cao became the undisputed most powerful warlord in all of China. His lifelong ambition was getting closer and closer to reality. In 107 AD, the 53-year-old man led a campaign against the Wuhuan tribes in northeast China and scored a resounding victory. On his way back to the capital, he penned the famous poem Ode to the Tortoise. A veteran steed in a stable still aspires to gallop 1,000 miles. A hero in his twilight years retains an unquenchable passion. Cao Cao acknowledged the natural order of life, yet he refused to be confined by age or fate. Even in his 50s, his ambition to unify the entire realm burned as fiercely as ever. But little did he know, an even bigger crisis was right around the corner. One that would completely reshape the balance of power in China. Next time, we will explore his crushing defeat at the Battle of Red Cliffs, the fierce rivalry and complex bond between him and Liu Bei, and how Cao Cao transformed from a capable minister to the king of Wei, a journey that would shape the entire course of Chinese history. If you like learning fascinating facts about Chinese history and want to explore more parallels between Eastern and Western history events, don't forget to follow me. Thanks for watching. See you next time. 再见。